Hello. In this lecture, we will go over in a little bit more details on the process of generating the keys. Before we get into that, we have to understand the difference between a hash, a message authentication code, and a hashed message authentication code. I think it helps understanding what happens under the hood in more details. So, we will start by talking about the purpose of hashing the message. If you are sending a message to a party, and you want to make sure the message arrives without modifications, you basically would use a hash. So, you will create your message, and then hash it. A hash produces a unique series of fixed-length bits. You would send your message and at the end of it, add the hash. The premise of this is, the recipient would get your message with the hash, they know how many bits is the hash, and they know it's at the end of the message. They extract the message, run the same hash function. If the hash outcome matches the one appended to the message, that means the message from the sender was not changed in transit. The issue with this is that we assume the attacker is unable to modify the message, and the hash in transit, fooling the recipient into believing the message was not altered. Okay, so the solution to this was to add a secret only known to the sender and receiver. This secret, we will call the secret key K. The sender would start with the key and append the message to it. The sender would then hash the outcome of the concatenated key and message. The sender would then send the message along with the hash of the secret, concatenated with message to the recipient. The receiver would get the message and validate it using the same method. If an attacker wants to alter the message, they would have to know the secret key. So, the attacker is smart, they can determine the key based on what is called collision keys. This means that they might be able to deduce the key based on just looking at the message in flight. So, the process that I just explained is message authentication code of hmac. To prevent the attacker from concluding the key, another method was devised. This is called the hashed message authentication code, short for hmac. In this method, the message gets scrambled and the keys get scrambled as well. There are two paddings that are used: an internal padding and an external padding. Those are well known and defined by the RFC. The internal padding is the hex value 5C, it is repeated multiple times to meet the bit size of the operation. For example, MD5 is 160 bits, so this will be repeated 80 times. The outer padding is the hexed value of 36, it is also repeated multiple times. So, here is what happens. The secret key will be XOR with the internal pad. The outcome gets concatenated with the message. The outcome of this operation will be hashed. It will then be concatenated with the XOR of the key and with the outer padding. The outcome will be then hashed. So, it's a cascade hash that's impossible to break due to the time it would take to figure out what is the secret key. It is not recommended to use MD5, as it's susceptible to collision attacks. It is better to use SHA hashing instead. Okay. So, now that we know what is hmac, the following are the algorithms. The MD5, like we mentioned, is not recommended. The hmac operation takes a block of data and produces a fixed output. In the case of MD5, it takes 512 bits, and produces a 160 bits output. So, what IKEv does is it basically produces the seed key. The seed key is produced based on the Diffie-Hellman shared key. That key cannot be calculated by an eavesdropper. The seed key is produced by running the pseudo-random function against the Diffie-Hellman shared key, using nonce initiator and nonce responder as the key. Now, this is called the seed key. The seed key is then used as the key to hash the concatenation of nonce initiator, nonce responder, security parameter index initiator, security parameter index responder. Okay, we know that running the hmac function produces a fixed output. So, if we run the pseudo-random function using MD5, we would get 128 bits. Now, we need way more bits to create the keys needed for the IKEv version 2 different functions. Assuming that we are using a AES 128-bit for both encryption and phase 2, as well as MD5 for authentication, we would need 1024 bits. So, to get that many bits, we need to run the pseudo-random function multiple times. However, to make the output different each time it runs, we have to chain the output in the next operation. So, here we determine that we need to run it 8 times. First run will produce T0, second time will produce T1 and so on. The output of T0 is concatenated with the nonce initiator and responder, SPI initiator, etc., and we will append a hex value of 1 at the end. Second run we will use T1, third run we use T2 and so on. We run the iterations as many times to get all the keys we need. Hopefully, this was helpful. We will talk more in the next lecture.